wants to know, what's your story? Hey, what's happening? Jason Woodland back again with Always the Journey TV, representing interview anyway, number 63. So we are moving right along, talking to all kinds of amazing people out here in the community, learning about their inspirations on what got them involved in the things they do. Always the Journey TV is all about understanding and spotlighting people in the community regarding their businesses, their jobs, their music, their art, their side hustles, their event spaces, and everything in between, like I say. Anyway, thank you very much for dedicating your time to watching the show. I would ask if you could please throw us a subscribe. I've got a button in one of the corners. Anyway, and also throw us a thumbs up if you enjoy the content, which I know you do. Anyway, I sincerely appreciate it again. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm really excited about introducing to you a very dear friend, Gailon Justus. Gailon was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and has been a tattoo artist since 1999. His interests include music, graffiti, and street art, tattooing, and being a dad. He has 2 kids and lives in Salt Lake City and has done his entire life. He grew up skateboarding and listening to punk rock in the 80s, definitely both great things. And his work is influenced by his exposure in his youth, and what he continues to be inspired by is the counterculture and what he considers to be the underground music and art movement. He said he has no formal art training, although he is phenomenally well versed in art. I'm really excited for you to check out his Instagram to see all of his amazing stuff. But before tattooing, he was in bands, and his interest in tattooing started as a young kid. He started getting tattooed at the age of 15 and didn't start tattooing until he was 26 years old. At that time, he married his high school sweetheart, Tara, and has 2 kids, Lauren and Zander. He owns a business called Sweet Needles Tattoos in downtown Salt Lake, and is in the process of helping some younger tattooers build a foundation for becoming the best they can be in the community. His goals are to continue to do art and become a better business owner while trying to navigate what's next as a dad and artist and also a business owner. He has a mission of contributing to the community, giving back, and learning from the youth and passing on what he has learned in this journey. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce my friend, Gailon.
What's up, man?
I'm doing awesome. I'm just sort of hitting the buttons and making the things go all over the place. So
nice.
Yeah, dude, it's great to see you this morning. What's happening?
Oh, not too much. Just stoked to do this interview with you. Never done an interview, so this will be pretty cool.
Heck yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. I'm so glad that you're here. And looks like you're representing your shop in downtown right now, right?
Yep.
Nice. I love that. So we want to learn more about who you are as a person and where you came from. So you said that your family is originally from Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then they moved here, and then you were born in Salt Lake City, and you've been here ever since.
Yep. My mom and dad came here. My mom kind of followed her sisters here. They all kind of married missionaries. My mom didn't, but they came out here and then had me, and then eventually kind of moved away, and I stayed here.
All right. Where did they did they go back to Oklahoma or somewhere else?
My dad went back to Oklahoma, and then my mom's just kind of traveled around. She's lived in Hawaii and California, and she's living in Arizona right now. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, what would you say that you love so much about Salt Lake City?
Man, Salt Lake's pretty cool. I mean, I feel like I kind of have a weird idea of Salt Lake just growing up here. You know what I mean? Like, I go other places and people kind of don't really have any idea about Salt Lake, you know, or they kind of have a weird skewed opinion of Salt Lake because of the Mormon culture, I think. But man, I think it's always been pretty cool here. The music scene's always been really cool here when I was growing up as a teenager. And actually, I think the weird thing that makes tattooing cool in Salt Lake is probably that Mormon people have so many kids and they don't all stay Mormon. And so when they decide not to be anymore, I think they kind of like, maybe do some extreme stuff, and getting tattooed is kind of one of them,
Well, I would say even the ones that don't leave Mormonism, I think, are also getting tattooed
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Well, in the last 20 years, it's not quite so taboo to get tattooed. So, people kind of find their way to tattooing or
That's
getting
awesome.
tattooed.
Yeah, definitely. So you grew up, you were in bands, you grew up in the punk rock and hardcore scenes, the graffiti scenes, the skateboard scenes. Tell us what sort of got you interested in those sort of subcultures all to begin with.
Well, I grew up LDS until I was about 13 years old, and I think once that kind of my parents ended up getting divorced, and then we kind of left the church, and then I kind of just uh, quit being friends with some of the Mormon kids that I grew up with, and found some new friends, and the friends that I met had kind of siblings that were into new wave and punk rock music, and then just skateboarding was kind of starting to be big, at that time period, and I just kind of found my way to that stuff.
Nice. Do you remember what was one of your favorite skateboards you ever owned?
Oh my gosh, man! I think my stepdad, for my first skateboard, was probably, what was it? It was like a Kmart brand. It was like Nash or
Uh huh.
something like that, and I was so bummed out that I had to have some knockoff off brand cheap skateboard. But then I think I had a Santa Cruz, and a Christian Hosoi board, and all sorts of other boards.
That is awesome. I
Yeah.
was definitely involved in the skateboard scene back in the '80s. Also, I
Yeah.
still have the Santa Cruz Corey O'Brien. I still have it, and then I
Oh,
also have a Santa
nice.
Monica Airlines as well. And I just, yeah,
Yeah.
they're awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you got involved also in the punk scene. What were a couple of the shows that you went to that really sort of stuck with you all the way until this day that had a huge impact?
Oh man. There's so many, dude. Um, it's kind of funny because I've been telling some of the younger people that I work with, about like the Pompadour and Stars, whatever it was at the time, and but there was that, there was the Speedway Cafe, and I saw, oh my gosh, so many bands, dude. Poison Idea, and Fugazi and Ministry at that venue, and then at the Pompadour, I saw Nirvana before they
Mhm.
kind of got big, which is really cool. Um, Man, so many bands.
Yeah, I was actually
Really,
telling that to someone the other day. We were standing next to the old Pompadour, and I said, "Did you know that Nirvana played here at one time before they got big?" And they're like, "No
yeah,
way, just this spot right here." And,
I know, right?
yep, we were
Yeah,
actually going to get some cookies over at Ruby Snaps. So
yeah,
shout out to Ruby Snaps.
yeah. Nice. That place is good.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. And so tell us a little bit about your younger life. Like, where did you go to high school? What was school like for you?
So I went to Highland High over in Sugar House, which is actually where I still live over in that area, which is kind of bizarre. Um, and my kids actually went to Highland. And Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad, back then it seemed like the whole like alternative movement and skateboarding and all that was not cool.
Hmm.
So we got a lot of flack for, being kids that were different and wearing makeup and hairspray, and even just skateboarding. If you weren't kind of not necessarily a freak, but just even skateboarding, you got a lot of flack for, you know what I mean? Which nowadays I think it's kind of more like normalized and accepted and whatever, which is really cool. But it definitely wasn't back then. We didn't have skate parks and all that stuff.
Yep.
Um, but it was cool. I probably didn't go to school like a lot of the time due to kind of, not really being accepted. but but yeah, you know, it was pretty cool.
Awesome. I'm also very blessed to have a piece of your art right there.
Oh yeah, the little postcard that I sent you.
Yep.
Yeah,
PMA.
yeah.
Love that.
Well, I feel like over the last couple years, I don't know, you know, it's gone from like um, me trying to, like, the last 20 years trying to be a good tattooer, and then, you know, over the last handful of years, you know, I moved upstairs into the space that I'm at right now for a couple years by myself. I've worked in walk-in tattoo shops for a long time, and I think after a little while, it kind of took a little bit more of a self, you know, kind of individual adventure, trying to figure it out for myself. And, you know, the PMA thing, and just like, I don't know, just some self-help, trying to be a better person in general is, you know, been a thing of mine. So
Yeah,
it's been cool.
that's awesome. So you became a tattoo artist at the age of 26. Before that, though, I mean, you've been involved in the art world for quite some time,
Yeah.
street art and so forth. What was it that sort of sparked your initial inspiration to become a tattoo artist from the previous art that you were doing?
Well, I mean, honestly, when I was younger, I was not, I mean, I was into art. I don't, you know, I definitely didn't find my way into it where I'm at now. For quite a while, I was more of a musician. Um, Started playing guitar when I was about 15 years old, and then started playing in some bands probably more when I was got to be about 18 or 19.
Oh, can you actually expand on that just a little bit further? Tell us a little
Yeah,
bit more
yeah.
about that music, please.
Yeah. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was younger. My grandma bought me a guitar. And one of the kids up the street that was into like thrash and heavy metal started kind of showing me uh, some Metallica riffs and you know, stuff like that. And then I'll go back a little bit. I moved out to Oklahoma with my grandma, and that's when I started playing guitar. And and then I eventually moved back to Salt Lake and found some friends that were playing in a band called Wicked Innocence, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
was and that was in probably '92, something like that. And I played in that band for about 3 years, and which was kind of like some uh, like I don't want to say straight death metal, but kind of death metal thrash, you know, band. And did that for a while, and then a few years after that, you know, I mean, kind of just cycling through being interested in different kinds of music. Eventually started playing in another band called Trailer Park, and that was kind of a little bit more like, I guess, alternative-y. I don't want to say necessarily grunge, heavier kind of, you know, uh, stuff. And then, you know, I kind of thought that was going to be my path, like as far as a career went, you know, playing music. And then actually started snowboarding, and did that for a good 7 or 8 years. And then, you know, once you start figuring out that some of those things aren't really like a long lasting career path, I guess for some people it is, you know. I'd been getting tattooed from a young age, and you know, didn't really kind of know what I was doing. Just kind of got tattooed when I was 15, and then just continued to get tattooed. I was interested in being, you know, like pursuing tattooing as a career, but back then it was like really not there weren't so many tattoo shops,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really a very acceptable thing to do, you know. In fact, my grandma was like, she found out I got tattooed when I was 15, and she's like, she got really mad at me, and I was like, well, I kind of want to be a tattoo artist, you know. And she's like, you can't do that. So So, from there, I just continued to keep getting tattooed. And then, yeah, I was still, I wouldn't say doing any sort of art, you know what I mean? Like visual art, but really loved tattooing
Mm-hmm.
or getting tattooed. And then I eventually met somebody, man, I was about 23 years old, and eventually I met somebody who helped me kind of get my foot in the door, working at a tattoo shop.
Right.
Not tattooing, but, just they're helping people out and helping the artists out and kind of doing the front end work of it,
Exactly. Do you remember? Well, I'm sure you do remember. Do you want to say what place was the very first tattoo you got?
Oh man. So the very first tattoo I got was a homemade tattoo. And that was in Oklahoma. And I didn't even know at that time, but tattooing in Oklahoma was illegal until 2004 or 5, I believe.
What?
Yeah.
Just in general.
In general. I mean, I couldn't get tattooed anyway because I wasn't 18, if it would have been legal. But yeah, it was illegal until then.
Wow, that's an interesting tidbit.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a Bible Belt state, and it's pretty conservative. So I think, I don't know exactly when it was, but I think that maybe in the 60s and 70s, people were getting tattooed, but it wasn't very sterile. It wasn't a sterile process. So I think people were getting, whether it be like hepatitis or staph infections or whatever. And I think that they just kind of illegalized it there. And I think there were only 2 or 3 states at that time that it was still illegal,
Wow.
and Oklahoma was one of them. So
That is very interesting.
yeah. So my first tattoo was just a homemade tattoo.
All right, nice.
Right.
So let's so non-homemade, where was the first place you got it?
ASI tattoo.
All right, down on State Street.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
The probably the older one that used to sit on the east side of the street. It was
Yeah,
like
there's another shop there now, but it was right next to the pawn shop in between. Well, it was in between the pawn shop and Tandy Leather.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I remember dropping off on a couple of occasions a mutual, very dear friend of ours, Zach Wallace, when he was also underage.
Yep.
We would cruise down there, and it would be like 9:45 at night, and I would just sort of drop him off and then pick him up a couple of hours later. And so, yeah, fun stuff.
Yep. So yeah, my first experience getting tattooed there, I had gotten that tattoo in Oklahoma, which is a homemade tattoo, and I was like, man, I need to get this thing fixed up. It's kind of crappy, And so I remember the Smiths on 9th East and 21st South, and there was a payphone there, and I got in the yellow pages and was, scanning through the yellow pages to the tattoo shops, and they had a little ad in there, and it said, cover ups and everything they, did. And I called them up, and I was like, hey, I want to get this tattoo fixed up. And the guy that answered the phone's like, come on down here. So I went down there, and I was, only 16. He didn't ID me. And I sat down, and he redid my tattoo. And I always tell a lot of people that I tattoo this, but I think I looked over halfway to kind of check out the tattoo, and he's like, don't look at it yet. It's not your tattoo. So that kind of scared the crap out of me as a young kid, so yeah, that was my first experience getting tattooed. And then, if the funny thing is that was the first tattoo shop that I actually got a job at. And I never even really told him that he was the first person that ever tattooed me.
That's cool. So you
Yeah.
worked with him that the whole time, and you never told him that he was the
No, he was just such a kind of a grumpy dude, and I appreciated having the job there, but we never really kind of connected on a level where I felt like I could tell him that.
Yeah. And
And
about what year was that?
that would have been, well, if I was 16, that would have been 86, 1986. Yeah. Actually,
Nice.
it would have been 1989. Sorry, bad math. 1989.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, I'd say the world of tattooing has definitely come, I mean, light years from where it was. And of course,
Yeah.
you've got the health department involved, and there's all kinds of sterile usages and so forth. And
Yeah.
I often joke, and I also joked with our friend Vic back on another interview that I actually don't have any tattoos, but it is one of my most favorite art forms in the world. And of course, growing up in the punk and hardcore and straight edge scenes and so forth, in my youth, I got to spend a lot of time in various tattoo shops with
Right.
friends getting tattooed, and then of course a lot of friends growing up, and they very tons of artists here in Salt Lake. And I mean, the talent pool here is absolutely amazing. I mean, really across the board, if you think about it, not only in the world of art, but also in culinary arts and business. And I mean, it just runs the gamut. We're really in a special sort of a microcosm of people here. I mean, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that in general?
I don't know. I was going to ask you the same thing. I was going to say, what do you think kind of like spawns that kind of stuff?
You know,
You know?
I honestly think that some of it spawns from the old school pioneers, to be honest with you,
Right.
because they had a really hardcore DIY mentality.
Right.
And that's really the whole sort of like punk and hardcore ethos, right? Is the
Yeah.
DIY. So I think that you have a huge sort of hotbed of people here, no matter how far removed from that particular culture, is still a very like, I can do it myself. I can figure this thing out.
Right.
I mean, what
Yeah.
is your take on that?
Man, I don't know. It's kind of a interesting idea. I haven't really thought about that myself. Um, I don't know. I mean, the interesting thing here is I think how cool the subculture is here, and I don't know if it's due to like the heavy conservative side of things, and then you've got this polar opposite. It seems like there's not a whole lot of like middle ground here. Seems like you're either kind of like really kind of over here or resisting it from the other side. You know what I mean? And I know that doesn't necessarily answer the question that you're kind of asking, but
But
yeah, I
it
don't
also
know.
sort of does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're going to have any kind of large scale populace, regardless of what it is, you're always going to have sort of a subpopulace that is sort of working against almost. So
Yeah.
I definitely see that as
Right.
a real possibility
Well,
as
maybe
well.
it's like you're saying, maybe it's like this whole, like, we're kind of, we are kind of removed from, I mean, I know nowadays with technology and the internet and stuff like that, it seems like the world is kind of a little more homogenized, you know what I mean, as far as like knowing what everyone's doing. But for a while, it seemed like different places that were, like, uh, not really in touch with necessarily the bigger city stuff. It's like these smaller places were maybe trying to figure it out.
Right, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point. So I would like to also learn a little bit more about your style of art. It is very
Okay.
unique. I absolutely adore it. And I know a ton of people do. Can you tell us about what inspired you to move down the path of the kind of art that you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever I first got into tattooing, I was definitely really drawn to traditional style tattoo art, which was I always kind of say it was like a language, you know what I mean? All the imagery, all the tattoo imagery is kind of a language, and So I was always like really attracted to probably what people thought was, sailory kind of tattoo stuff. Um, and so, when I first started getting tattooed, I was getting a lot of that kind of those tattoos. And actually, I think in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it kind of started to shift, and people were exploring all these kind of like, I think people were starting to get bigger scale tattoos. And so, it got a little wilder as far as like, the imagery and the colors and all that stuff. But I think I still kind of had this interest and attraction to like simpler, I don't know, not as, I guess, just kind of more in the traditional tattoo realm of tattoos. But and I think that, at the same time I started getting into tattooing, I was actually starting to get into graffiti, which Salt Lake is, I mean, kind of had its runs of graffiti here, but it's seems like maybe there's like a smaller group of people that do it here. And you go to bigger cities, whether, and whether it be like San Francisco or New York City or some of these places where it's just like kind of like it's almost like an untamed beast. You know what I mean? They can't kind of contain it because there's just so much of it. Salt Lake's been kind of like a little bit different because I feel like the city is a little bit more on top of cleaning up graffiti, and maybe it's the Mormon culture kind of doesn't want it to look out of control here. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is there wasn't so much of it. I mean, there were little pockets of it. So whenever, I mean, that was when I was about 20, my early 20s, I started to see that stuff. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is I was started to like be attracted to that kind of imagery, which is real different from tattooing in some ways. So I started kind of getting into that and meeting some people that were doing that, and so kind of trying my hand at some of that stuff. And then I think that combined with what I was seeing and trying to figure out with tattooing, it was kind of like a little bit of this mishmash of both of those things, which I guess what I'm trying to get at is in the long run, I was, still messing with the two things and tried to keep them kind of separate. You know what I mean? And maybe at some point, it just kind of like one thing kind of mixing with the other thing. And I think a lot of what my style ended up turning out to be, which is kind of the stuff like behind us and all over in this shop, is kind of a result of that,
Yeah. I actually want to show off some of your art. And of course, my computer's doing something sort of funny. So I'm going to bring up your Instagram on here and sort of show off some of the stuff that you work on.
Right.
I mean, you are a wildly talented person. So as you see, these here are not necessarily canvas. This is on wood, right?
Yeah, they're on masonite panels.
Okay. So let's also get an idea of your tattoo art, so people can get an idea of what that also looks like. I mean, this is just absolutely phenomenal work.
So I mean, like, I mean, like that the tattoo that you just pulled up, that Ganesh, it's like kind of a little bit more of a, it's iconic kind of tattoo imagery, but kind of a little bit different as far as style wise goes.
Yeah, I mean, this is just absolutely phenomenal. So, I mean, obviously, you're extremely well versed in both mediums of graffiti art as well as tattooing. But I'd like to know from your perspective, which one is tougher, or something you have to put more sort of mind into it.
Well, I mean, I think the thing with the tattoo stuff, and this is kind of where I feel like there are some differences, but some similarities, like I think that the tattoo thing, especially in kind of the traditional aspect of tattooing, there's a lot of rigid kind of things that go into it. It's not like I have a lot of people, tattooers that I've known that don't really compare tattooing to, they don't compare it to, I guess, art. You know what I mean? They're like, it's not really art. There's kind of like, you can get creative with it and do different things with it, but there's kind of like some rigid rules that kind of go along with it, that kind of, where I think whenever you kind of think of art, you think of it as like, oh, you can kind of do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And I think in tattooing, it's kind of more of a process kind of art, I guess, is maybe a way to put it. But then at the same time, I think that there's people that also in the graffiti world don't compare graffiti to art. You know what I mean? They say that it's there are also some foundation rules that if you're not doing it this way and this way and this way, then it's kind of garbage. You know what I mean? So, but I do kind of think that tattooing for me is a little more, like there are a lot more guidelines and rules that make a good tattoo. Opposed to like some of those paintings that you were just showing, in the beginning of stages of those paintings, it's just kind of flinging paint on the surface and seeing what happens. You know what I mean? And then from there, kind of building imagery on top of that stuff. So that stuff for me is a little bit more less rigid, and I don't want to say fun, but like, you can kind of just like throw something against the wall and see what sticks. You know what I mean?
Right. And
that if it doesn't work, at least somebody's not walking around with it on them forever. You know what I mean?
I was actually just going to make that
you
same
can just
point.
paint over it. Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And honestly, that's one of the, there's a multitude of reasons why I've got such a high level of respect for tattoos. And that's one of them, is that you really can't mess up. You have to make sure you're on point every single step of the way, because unlike graffiti art, you can't just buff it.
Right.
Or just say, oh, I burned the piece and put it in the garbage and start over.
Right.
And then on top of that, of course, you're really, from that sort of, I guess, customer service perspective, you're really wanting to make sure that the client has exactly what they were expecting when they sat down.
Right.
And I think that's probably a big piece of it. Would you say so?
Yeah, definitely. Which I think is interesting, because I just had somebody I tattooed the other day, and they had a tattoo, and they told me, they were like, whenever I come in here, it's a really different experience from getting tattooed somewhere else. And I was kind of like, well, what do you mean by that? And I don't think that I was so much like this in the beginning, but even for myself, it's good for me to have an idea of what the end game outcome is going to be, instead of, just making a little doodle and then being like, oh, well, let's just see what happens, and I guess, that person that I was telling you about, they're like, I went somewhere else. The guy came out with the drawing. It wasn't a rendered out drawing or anything. He stuck he did the tattoo, and by the end I was like, oh, okay, well, that wasn't necessarily exactly what I was expecting. You know what I mean? Where I think a lot of the time, whenever I show somebody what they're going to get, it's pretty much like, this is what it's going to look like. Does that
Right.
make sense?
It makes perfect sense. So what
So
you're
even
showing in the beginning is identical to what
yeah,
they're okay.
and even in the beginning, I mean, and even as much for me as it is for them, like I want to make sure that when we're done, it's, you know, I'm stoked on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
There's a particular gentleman in town. I don't know if he's around anymore. I'm not going to say any names or even the name of the spot. He's an old schooler. He's been around for a really, really long time, and he was definitely a free spirit. And I remember having a few friends that we'd go down there and they'd get their tattoo, and he did quite phenomenal work at that point. But I remember one person in general. She had this little tiny piece that she wanted, like in the small of her back or something like this big, and she said, "Oh, I want to go to this individual." And I said, "There's a 0% chance it's going to end up looking anything close to like that if you go to this person." I'm
right,
like, "He does great work, but it's not going to be anything like that." And she goes, "No, no, he will." Well, anyway, by the time he was done outlining, this piece ended up being a half back piece, and then also the pieces that came all the way up her back rib cage and then down to her thigh, and it ended up being about a foot tall.
right,
And so yeah, I mean, I know that there's some people that operate a little bit differently.
yeah, yep. Which, you know, I mean, sometimes when that happens, people are more excited than what they thought they were going to get in the first place,
Yeah, thankfully
right?
she was, I think. I mean, this is probably 1994,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
So I mean, it was quite some time ago, but yeah, she was overwhelmed when she looked in the mirror. She was pretty
yeah.
blown away, but at the same time, she's like, "Well," like it was almost like she jumped into cold water. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I can't." But it does look cool. But oh my gosh, it was pretty hilarious.
Right.
So, if you don't mind sharing with us, what was maybe one of the inspirations behind the name Sweet Needles, if you don't mind sharing with us?
You know what's funny is when I was working at Lost Art, that was the one of the first shops that I actually started to tattoo at. One of my coworkers and I were all we kind of he was always I don't exactly remember how the name Sweet Needles came about, but he would always joke with me. He'd be like, "Yeah, Sweet Needles, the human thistle," and I was like, "That is just so funny, dude." And then I think at that point I made some T-shirts that had that said Sweet Needles on them, and then I think once Instagram came around, I was just like, okay, well, you know, you have to have a profile name on there, you know, on Instagram. And my username, I was like, maybe I'll just use Sweet Needles. And then so I kind of ran with that for a while. And then actually for probably about 10 years. And then once I opened this shop, I was like, man, what am I going to call it? You know what I mean? What am I going to call the shop? And we kind of thought of a bunch of different crazy names. And I was like, well, if I use Sweet Needles, I've already kind of been using this for a while and it's got some traction. So I'm just going to go with that. So it's kind of funny because people will call here and I think they get the idea that anything associated with needles, you know, it's either we sell needles, we do piercings. So it's kind of funny.
That's awesome. Maybe you should give a piece of candy out to everybody who gets a tattoo.
Nice.
You know me and my marketing mind,
Yeah.
regardless of how ridiculous it could be at some
Right.
point, I always throw the ideas at least.
Right. That's funny.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. And also follow him on Instagram. He's got a huge following on there all to begin with, but you'll be able to see all kinds of amazing art on there. So, so I've got a couple of other questions here. So first of all, so geographically speaking, I know where you're at, but can you tell my listeners and watchers where your shop is located?
It's in downtown Salt Lake City on Pierpont Avenue, which, you know, at one point, this building was a big art
Mm-hmm.
space for a lot of artists. And then I think right around the time that I started my private studio that was upstairs, which was about 6 years ago, I think they had just kind of turned the building over to some new owners, and they started kind of kicking out a lot of people that were here for a long time. And I think that was, just by raising the rent up a lot higher than it was. But yeah, so I'm right downtown.
Okay.
Kind of like a little off the beaten path street, but people find their way to us. I think it's more of a destination spot.
Yeah, definitely. Especially to get that candy. So,
yeah.
Oh man. So, who does your client look like in terms of someone that is going to want your style of art? Sort of the persona of the person. So, like, is it someone that wants traditional? Is it someone, like, tell me a little bit more about that. So if someone watching this are like, yeah, he's definitely my guy, I want to go down and get artwork from him.
Right.
Tell us more about that, please.
Well, it's interesting because I think when I first started tattooing, it was kind of before the whole social media thing, and people were just coming in based off, what they would see on the street, or what their friends tattooed look like, or a reputation of the shop, and then I think as social media started playing more of a part in people being able to track down tattooers, I think. And it's kind of interesting because I had a conversation with one of my old coworkers about it, and he asked me, he said, "Where do you think tattooing?" This is probably in 2015-ish, something like that. And he was like, "Where do you see where do you see tattooing going as far as, like, the customers and that kind of thing?" And I was kind of like, "I don't really know exactly what you mean," but he was like, "I think it's going to end up being more, more of a man, what's the word I'm looking for? Specializing in, so I think that the customers are going to really just go to the person, the tattooer, for their style, what they do, which was interesting because I mean, I was starting to feel like that, like maybe 10 years into tattooing, that people were coming just to me for what I do. But I don't think at that time I had still kind of like started doing the style that I'm doing now. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is, I think that people nowadays are searching out an artist to do kind of what they do,
Yep.
versus back in the day whenever people were like, well, this is my grand idea. Like, now you kind of bring it to fruition. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I think most of the people that end up coming to me to get tattooed, and there's still people that will send me off the wall stuff that isn't my style, but they know that I can do it, and they have maybe gotten tattooed from me in the past, and just they've had a good experience, and they don't necessarily want some wacky kind of wild out of the box stuff, you know what I mean? And I still do some of that too, but I feel like most of the people that want me to tattoo them are looking for, it's almost like collecting art, I feel like, at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some people come back over and over and over and keep getting stuff from me, and then some people will come in and they're like, I've gotten a piece from this person, that person, and this person, and it's more of like a collection of art.
Yeah, I actually love that as a concept for sure, because
Yeah.
it tells more of a story about, like, where you've been and
Yeah.
who you've worked with, and
Yep.
their specialty.
Yeah.
So someone can either come to you with their own idea, or they can come to you and have you draw something up from some concepts they may explain to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
I
cool.
mean, I've got like some portfolio books out here on the table that have a lot of sheets of, flash, which is all sorts of designs on one sheet of paper. And sometimes people will just make an appointment, and I'll ask them what they want to get, and they are just like, I just want to show up and I want to look at some stuff that you have, and I'll just pick something out.
Nice.
And other times people give me ideas, pictures, a story, a concept, and they'll just be like, I just want to let you kind of run with the ball. So
Mm-hmm. And would you say, is there anything too small or too big that you would work on, or can you
I
work?
mean, not really. I mean, it's kind of crazy now that I'm getting a little older, like I used to not have to wear glasses. I think just the years of having to look at a small spot for a long amount of time, it's kind of stressed my eyes out. So little tiny tattoos aren't, the easiest thing for me to do anymore. But, I do anything from small tattoos to back pieces to, you know what I mean? Big tattoos. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place.
Okay,
That's kind
nice.
of what makes it interesting, I feel like that's kind of nice about doing tattoos. I feel like it's never doing the same thing kind of over and over again,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the thing is also ultra fascinating. I could imagine from a tattoo artist perspective is that you've got thousands of people walking the earth wearing
Yeah.
your art.
Every now and again, we try to calculate the numbers on how many people that is. You know what I mean?
How many do you think approximately?
I don't know. It's funny because on my Instagram page, it says like 15,000 plus served since 1999. And I mean, that's just a guesstimate. You know what I mean? But that's somewhere in that vicinity.
Wow. That
Yeah,
is amazing.
it is.
Gosh, good work.
It's nuts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of really amazing tattoo artists, and I'm very lucky to do so. And I would say that you're definitely one of my favorite. There's some magnificent talent here in this town, and I love being able to talk to so many amazing artists and just so much creativity. And I appreciate your art. You do phenomenal work. To the watchers of this show, please definitely follow him on Instagram. I mean, he's just a phenomenal talent. So two more questions here. So one of them, if someone wants to book an appointment with you, what is the best way to do so?
Usually through my email, sweetneedlestattoo@gmail.com. Is usually the easiest way for me to kind of keep everything in one place and figure it out.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So definitely hit him up on Gmail, Sweet Needles Tattoo at gmail.com, located in downtown Salt Lake City. He's worked on people all over the world, so be one of those people. So final question before we move to a close. What is one of your favorite songs or favorite quotes or both?
Or both.
Or both.
Oh man, it's hard. I mean, I feel like I'm into so much music and there's so much like that's such a hard thing to kind of figure out. I've been trying to kind of like, I don't know, figure out, like I was telling you, just kind of all this like self-help exploring and I heard the corniest thing the other day, but it was the Nike Just Do It thing is, I mean, just to me, just doing whatever it is, just getting out there and doing it is like kind of just a really big deal to me. And because I think that it's the only way you're going to like figure out what works and what doesn't work,
Yep. I 100%
So
agree with that.
kind of sounds like a cheesy thing to say, but
It's not cheesy at all. I mean, it's
yeah,
been one of the most successful taglines possibly in world history. So
right.
I don't see it as cheesy whatsoever. In fact, really, it sort of boils down to that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can study until the cows come home. You can get all the certificates, degrees, books, whatever else. But until you do, you're never really going to learn the most powerful lessons, right?
Yep. True.
I appreciate you sharing that for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so songs. If you're cruising down the freeway, what is one song that definitely just hits for you?
I don't know. For some reason, just like Van Halen Jump just keeps coming to my mind.
Dude, I love Van Halen.
Right? It's good stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a handful of those Van Halen songs that no matter how off base your day is, if you put it on, you're in
Yeah,
enjoying it.
yeah. And it's just so outrageous, man. I love it.
Completely agree. Is there
Right.
anything that I forgot to touch on that we need to know about you or your art?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I think I forgot, and this is kind of like a timestamp, but like when I was telling you about the first tattoo shop I worked at, and telling you that Don, the owner of ASI, tattooed me, he just passed away in the last month or two from COVID. So I was gonna kind of say that whenever I was talking about all that, but yeah, so
Dang.
kind of a trip, right?
Yeah, rest in peace for him. I've
Yep.
only met that gentleman one time, and it was many, many years ago. But yeah, that's
Yeah, he was a grumpy dude, and I probably had a lot more of the learn not what not to do than the what to do's. You know what I mean from him, but sometimes those are the most important lessons, right?
yeah, absolutely. And also, he was partly what paved the way as well here in
Yeah.
Salt Lake. So
Yep.
awesome, man. Well, I definitely
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that. That's sad news, though, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. I'm going to have you hang
Okay.
tight in the green room for just a few moments, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Awesome, brother. Thank you
Cool.
so much for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure having you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So definitely follow him on Instagram, Sweet Needles or Sweet Needles Tattoo at gmail.com to book an appointment, and then also follow him on Instagram at Sweet Needles. It was such a pleasure having you join us on the show, and also thanks for watching the show. Subscribe to the channel, throw us a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, also throw them in the comments. If I've got the answer, I'll do my best to answer it. But I do know that he will also be able to jump on and answer the questions as well. So thank you for joining us. I sincerely appreciate it. Have a wonderful week. I'm going to go ahead and throw up some outro music now. Much love. Take care of yourselves.